echo what Dr. Healy had just said and add my own warm welcome to you all. I see some familiar faces and names, which is just fantastic, and also many other new ones. I think Diego started us off in a great way by saying hello and where he's from. So thank you for that, Diego, and he's joining from Brazil. I'd invite all of you to do that. So we are up to a lot of folks, but it's really fun to see where everyone's from. I just saw Anna from Belgium as well. So thank you so much for joining us, including from different time zones. So go ahead and tell us where you're from. Oh, from Morocco. Fantastic. This is wonderful. And from Florence, Italy. Hello, Camilla. Yes. So glad you're here with us. And many, of course, from closer to home here, either in Cleveland, Ohio, or the US. So wherever you're coming from, though, whatever your affiliation, it's a delight for me to be able to have this time with you. Let me go ahead and start us off here. So the title for today of what I've kind of prepared is The Art and Science of Helping People Change. That'll sound familiar, like Dr. Healy had mentioned, those of you who might know some of the work of my colleagues, Richard Boyatzis and Melvin Smith, and many others here in our organization behavior department. We are very much about learning and development and growth and change. That's what kind of consumes us and fuels us. And so I wanted to share some insights with you, but let me kind of ground us all in some reality. One aspect of reality is that this is an extraordinary moment in time for humanity. We all have our own personal experiences with the last several years, of course. However, 2 years ago, in working with a senior executive who was in turn working with her C-suite leaders, we discussed the fact that organizations who will survive this phase that we've been in of incredible and unforeseen challenge are those who understand it's very much around taking care of your people right now. And that includes us as well. So, you know, exercising self-compassion, but also being able to do that for others. And we've seen and have been kind of buoyed by so many examples of just compassion and stories of people helping others. At the same time, for many of us, we can relate to this either ourselves or in our organizations and in our families, right? Maybe it's a crisis of engagement. We're exhausted. Maybe it's a crisis of burnout even. And so the statistics that, you know, Gallup continues to collect around engagement, which I have no doubt many of you on this call are very familiar with, haven't really changed much. It's like 30% and declining in terms of the percentage of people who report being fully engaged in their work. So we seem to be having like a fundamental struggle here, a major struggle. And so organizations, many of you from these organizations, right? This keeps you up at night. This might be your direct kind of purview or responsibility. Well, you're not alone if that's the case, or maybe you're a manager and you've got individuals reporting to you and you're trying to figure out how do you keep them engaged? How do you kind of like light that spark, right? Well, here's some good news. The good news is that we are all kind of wired as humans to help. So in spite of the immense kind of challenge and the very real exhaustion, right, that many of us feel and others around us experience, there's a big, bright, shining light here. And that is, as human beings, we're actually kind of equipped and motivated to help others. You do this in all of your roles. People around you do. We do this as managers, as mentors, as coaches, as ministers and pastors. And we do this as physicians and nurses and a multitude of other healthcare workers. We do this as educators and teachers. We do this as parents and friends. Oftentimes what we really want for those, especially those that we interact with the most, people on our team, people in our family, our own, children, those we care deeply about, is that we want to help them. We want to help them in many ways to be happy, to be successful, right? But the way we go about that helping is what's really interesting, because a lot of times we go about it with the best of intentions and all the wrong approaches. And so I want to just double click on that a little bit, and first connect you in with your own personal experience of helping relationships. And some of you who've worked with us might know this exercise, but it's one that kind of is timeless. So if it's your first time answering this question, or maybe you've thought about it before, it doesn't matter. I want you to really take a couple of minutes and pause and consider who has helped you become the person you are today. And think about what is it that they said or did that was really memorable or meaningful. So I'm just going to pause for a moment so you can collect your thoughts. Think of one, maybe two people, but just try to zero it into one or two. All right, hopefully you've had a chance to kind of connect in with a memory. I know I'm thinking about my parents, and I'm thinking about one of the best managers I ever worked for. Actually, two of them. I've been fortunate enough to have several. So I'm just really zeroing in on the experience being with them and working with them, if it was a professional sense, and some moments with them. So that's what I'm hoping you're doing as well, because I want to kind of run a poll here and together analyze some of those experiences in terms of the ways that people who you're thinking of have helped you. So we've got a couple of prompts. Dr. Healy's going to cue that up for us. You can check any and all that apply. So it's not just one best answer. But think about the one person or two, not just in general, but the person you're reflecting on, and check any and all that apply in the ways that they've helped you.
All right, we've got responses coming in. %28% and climbing. So for those of you that don't see the poll, it should have popped up in another window for you. All right, 66%, getting there.
We'd love to hear from the majority. Kind of helps us to know the experiences in our cohort and to learn from each other, right? So please do take a minute to chime in if you are able to.
Yep, we'll give it about another 10 seconds. We're at 80%. All right.
All right, let's see what the results here. So, Susanna, is everybody able to see the results or just me?
Yes.
Okay,
nope, everybody should see them.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So let's take a look here. There's two of these kind of dimensions of how people have helped you that are kind of the front runners for our group. Somebody who challenged you to stretch and to reach your potential, and somebody who expressed confidence in your abilities when you doubted yourself. But fairly closely behind that, you see someone who cared for your well-being and provided a safe space for you to process feelings. And then if you skim the rest, it kind of drops down a little bit more. People who helped you see something in you that you didn't know existed, gave you direct feedback in an area needing improvement. And the one that's for our group at the very bottom is somebody who directed you regarding what, specific steps to take. So that's really fascinating to see, and pretty much in line with a lot of what we often see. What we know when we are with groups of kind of all different characteristics is a couple of themes that rise to the top over and over again. And there's two dominant themes that I wanted to leave with you. One is that the people that we remember the most, and we say that they've had like a really meaningful impact positively on us and shaped who we are today, in some way helped us to expand our vision of ourselves and our future. In fact, when we've collected data around this, it's actually that 80% of the moments that people report involved these other individuals, helping us to extend kind of our image of the future for ourselves, reach for some new dream or aspiration, or consider what it means to be a good person and to be successful, like to be able to think about our values and our purpose, is what it means to be a good person, and also kind of the ingredients for success. But there's another dimension, and that is that those individuals kind of unleashed positive emotion in us. And there's all sorts of ways that they do that, but they leave us with a sense of wholeness. They leave us with a sense of joy. They leave us with a sense of accomplishment, of being loved. And as you said in one of those factors, cared for, right? We feel cared for, that someone's taken an interest in us. And so positive, inspiring, helping relationships that kind of go the distance, which I would say for all of us really is what we're trying to do for others, really boils down to these components most of the time. It's not exclusive. There's definitely, as you reported, certain times where you might need someone to lay out the exact same steps that you need to follow. But if you remember, that was the last item on our rank order list here. And so that just tells us that the moments we recall and the people who've had the most impact positively are emphasizing these other components. So this is all about kind of our approach, right? And thinking about what we do. So let's talk a little bit about what we know and how people and adults change in particular. So we know from adult learning theory that adults change when they want to or when they need to, like they personally feel or believe that they've got to change. Mandated change never sticks. In fact, it looks more like this. So if you've been around kids, maybe your own or others, or maybe just even remember this dynamic, this is kind of classic, right? It's like the 2-year-old who just says no. That's one of the first words kids learn. Why? Because it's an independence in us that we really don't want to be told what to do from a very early age. Instead, as managers, as parents, as coaches, as mentors, right, in all of our roles, we have to inspire change. So what does that mean? You've got to ignite an inner flame in others to really, truly help them learn, develop, grow, change. When most of the time, what our defaults are is to light a fire underneath people. So the key here is shifting. How do you ignite an inner flame as opposed to, constantly lighting a fire so that people hop, metaphorically speaking, right? So what engages our motivation to change? Once we can maybe spark that desire, we know there's a couple of components that really make a huge difference. One is connecting somebody else with what they care deeply about, their dreams, their values, their sense of purpose. Another is to be able to actually have a positive, powerful image of the future. We use the word vision, and sometimes for some people that can feel a little daunting. A vision, think of it as really an image in some future state, in this case of them in their lives, or maybe at work, what they could be doing, or, could be in ways that they themselves want to have an impact and find their own purpose. We also know that doses of positive emotion over negative make a huge difference. So a lot of times we're blind to the impact of kind of emotion and how we pick up the emotions of those around us and what effect that has, right? So even Dr. Healy starting off with some music, and just kind of put me in a great mood, and hopefully you as well. There's lots of different ways we can spark positive emotion, and it makes a difference for us to learn how to do that and to do that as often as we can. And another key component is that we don't do this alone. We don't learn, grow, change alone, especially as we get older, because we have a lot of other things going on. So those of you who are in the business of change management, with clients, for instance, or in your own organizations or on your own team, all of these components are important. And I would offer to you that sometimes we forget that people will change and are most motivated to do so when they're surrounded by trusting, supportive relationships. I know that many of you are interested, or maybe even yourselves are coaches. Certainly coaching is a big area of research and teaching and service here at the Weatherhead School. And it's something that I personally have been involved in myself for over 25 years. Coaching really is about partnering with an individual or group in a process that sparks, that optimizes the other person's potential. And that process is thought-provoking and creative. We love this description by the International Coaching Federation for that reason. My colleagues and I also think of it as like boiling it down to, it is about helping others with their intentional change. So those of you who are coaches, or maybe you oversee coaching in your organizations, or maybe you yourself are on a path to become a coach, coaching is one way that we help others, right? So I just wanted to touch on that. And if we use coaching as an example to flush out some of these ideas of how we know people change, there are kind of two prominent approaches to coaching that we see in the field. One is coaching for compliance, and another is coaching with compassion. Some of you might be familiar with these concepts. If you've worked with us, I'm just going to kind of quickly summarize them in case others might be new to them. But the idea of coaching for compliance is that we're coaching others, we're helping them, right, to achieve some sort of external standard. It could be often a performance, of skill, or whatever. And it's all about the external view that's set by the organization, or the field, and it dictates how that person needs to behave or perform. So it really is coaching for performance. And often it's very prescriptive and short term, like you're working with somebody to help them with a specific skill or knowledge area. And this works really, really well, especially when the context is known and the outcomes are predictable. And so those of you who have coaching in your organizations for a certain skill, maybe you're trying to help new sales managers, learn the art of how influencing occurs with your particular products or clients, there's well-established best practices there, right? So coaching for compliance could really be useful. However, when overdone, make no mistake, it is a lot of telling people what to do. And as this kind of picture illustrates, it's like sometimes if overdone, somebody else is squawking at us. And the reaction inside of individuals on the receiving end is not that different than this cute little puppy, like, tell me again while you're telling me what to do, right? And the reason is because it negates our own intelligence to figure that out on our own. And so that's where a lot of people actually are going to be much more engaged. Coaching with compassion is different. It is about the partnering. So this image looks a little different. We're side by side, or the penguins are here side by side, right? The idea is that the aim is on inspiring an individual to think and imagine and articulate what it is that they want to do, or what matters to them. So you become the guide and the facilitator in that. It's also known as coaching for intentional development in that way. So the emphasis is different here. The emphasis is on the relationship not so much just the task or the results. And it's very much grounded in empathy. And the focus is on long-term sticky change. We do a lot of kind of work or discuss it and frame it as sticky change, meaning like change, learning, growth that endures. It's not fleeting. And so there's some kind of key principles for inspiring sticky change that I wanted to offer to you as immediate takeaways. But let me go ahead and pause here and see if there's any comments or questions from our group before I move on. So anything that kind of resonates with you, or something that you might want to know a little bit more about around what we just discussed. So you can, yes, like Susanna is putting in the chat, you can, best way, since we have such a large group, will be to just raise your hand so we can quickly see you. But you certainly are welcome to put any reflections in the chat too. And if we're good to kind of jump right back in, that's okay as well. I just want to always pause and just see everyone's faces and see in case there is somebody who wanted to share. All right, let me go ahead and keep moving, Suzanne, and we'll move into the key principles for inspiring sticky change. So, with only this like 45 minutes or an hour, right? I'm trying to distill a whole lot of research and a whole lot of work into bite-sized chunks, so to speak. And oh, by the way, I do enjoy that. Before I got into this work as a researcher, I was working in organizations as a practitioner. So I always find it helpful, right, to be able to translate this into something that's practical and actionable. And so it's in that spirit that I wanted to offer, at the very least, here are three principles that are important for inspiring sticky change. This is true for you to inspire it within yourself, as well as for you in your roles helping others to do the same. So the first one is the power of positive emotion. We've teed that up a couple times already. A second is dreams, not just goals. And a third is resonant relationships. So let me just kind of walk us through a couple of these. So first principle is the power of positive emotion. For many people, this concept may be new. And I can honestly tell you, in all the years that I've been kind of studying change and in the field or work around helping others change, learning this for me has been transformative. And the concept is really simple. And that is, as humans, we experience emotions that move in between a positive and negative emotional attractor. Think of those as like magnets, internal magnets. And so what that means is that subconsciously, you are constantly moving between experiences that unleash positive emotions within you and others that unleash more negative emotion. I don't mean to oversimplify this, but I just say, in reality, we don't really stay in the neutral ground very often. If you just do a quick kind of a review of your last 48 hours, from like sun up to sundown, and the experiences that you've had and the corresponding emotions, I have no doubt that you can see how you've been moving between experiences that are really joy-filled or kind of filled with pride, maybe just leave you kind of laughing and having a great time, as well as others that might spark frustration, annoyance, fear, worry, and the like, right? So that's characteristic of all of us as humans. There are actually correlates physiologically. There's emotional correlates, there's neuroendocrine arousal correlates, and a neural network activation correlate, meaning that when we are in a positive or negative emotional state, our kind of internal systems embody different characteristics. Our neuroendocrine arousal in a positive emotional state activates our parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest and digest system, right? This is you kind of calm and kind of at steady state. Hopefully you're feeling that now as part of this, just taking a time out to join us for this session. but maybe not. Maybe there's something that's happening. Maybe there's a big customer issue. Maybe there's something happening that earlier today, hopefully nothing serious, but, maybe you're dealing with something that's stress filled. In that situation, when negative emotions are aroused, you are activating your sympathetic nervous system. So that's our system where, we're pumping cortisol, through our bodies, and our focus is very much heightened, right? Turns out there's a neural network activation as well that's distinctive. When we're in a positive emotional state, our empathic network is activated. This network allows us to think creatively, to think more openly, to actually kind of cognitively be more open. However, negative emotions in that experience activate a different dominant neural network, which is our analytic one. That network also is characteristic when we're really, really focused on work, or when you're trying to solve, a specific problem, or there's a crisis happening, where you're trying to address whatever that is. And so it's kind of revealing for us to understand the power of positive emotion is that the more time we spend there, the more we're actually able to set ourselves up to think more broadly, more literally, like kind of intelligently, and be able to access all of our kind of physiological resources to the best of our ability. Now, a little bit more around kind of the neural network that's really fascinating. We draw upon the work of our colleague, Tony Jack, at the Brain Mind Consciousness Lab here at Case. And Tony and his colleagues years ago ran a number of studies helping us to really understand the phenomena of the opposing domains. And what the opposing domains are about is that these dominant networks of your analytic network and your empathic network in your brain literally kind of oppose one another. So take a look at this. This is from Tony Jack and his colleagues' labs. But if you can see the pattern here, the analytic network is the light blue line and the empathic network is the orange line. And so you notice that those two networks and the graphs are suppressing one another. What this means for us is that we can't activate both of these networks at the same time. If you're really engaged in something that requires a lot of focus, a lot of kind of work around logic, a lot of details and the like, in that moment, depending on how long you're there and also how deeply ingrained you are in that particular experience, it'll be really difficult for you to then turn around and be able to participate in a brainstorming conversation about new product innovation in the organization. So in kind of layman's terms, the way these work is like they're two super highways neurologically. And much like when you're driving on highways, you cannot drive on two highways at the same time. So this has implications for us in our work and also in our experience of helping others. We've got to be able to put ourselves in an empathic network and to be able to focus on the relationship with others, to be able to hear them, listen to them, focus on what it is that they want and need, as opposed to when we're in analytic mode and we're problem solving. Principle number 2 is dreams, not just goals. This one, is one I spend a lot of time with managers and leaders and organizations around, because our organizations run on goals, right? And that's fantastic. So we're not saying goals are something that aren't important or that we need to dismiss. That's not what we're saying here. What we are saying, though, is that we also have to make sure we're helping others tap into dreams. Dreams is, again, our ability to imagine an exciting future. That's what it is. And in this phase or stage of being able to help others, we unleash the expression of their ideal self. The ideal self includes all sorts of things: your core values, your purpose, what gives you energy, again, this picture of the future. It is the same cognitive skill set as when you go through visioning in your organization for new product development or new services, or trying to address, something that's that you want to kind of pivot or take the organization or the team in a new direction. What's different here is that it's different parts of our brains. And in order for us to optimize that image of the future, we have to be able to engage our passion, not just for who we wish to be, but or not just for what we wish to do, but who we wish to be. It's the being and the doing both. And most of the time we skip, right over this. I do see, Alexander, that you have your hand up. Do you have a comment on one of these two principles or something else? You can take yourself off mute. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Loud and clear. We can hear you. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm off mute, so I'm not sure.
Yeah,
You're good. We can hear you now.
We can hear you. What's your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah. We sure can. Why don't you maybe try to put it in the chat, or but we could hear you clearly. I'll go ahead and keep moving, and then we'll see if we can get it to work in a moment. So principle number 3 is resonant relationships. And so resonant relationships really is tagging onto that idea that we don't change by ourselves. It's not a solo act. We actually need the support of trusting, supportive others in order to be able to learn, grow, change, transform, in an optimal way. And here we're borrowing a term from music and physics, right? So think of it as a metaphorical term. Resonance is really about being in sync and in tune. And when we do that musically, right, we get harmony. When we do it in a sense of kind of like physics or through the sciences, we see like the frequencies are in sync. And so in much the same way, the overall goal for all of us to be able to help others in ways that are deeply meaningful is that we've got to be able to connect with them. We have to be able to connect and be in sync and in tune with others, and also kind of then create this positive emotional tone. And here's some more good news. This is not rocket science. It is about listening beyond what you hear. So you can't build a relationship without, at the very least, connecting with others, and connecting starts with you listening. And so that starts with your mindset and approach that you need to seek to understand, not be understood. You need to ask more than you tell, and you need to operate with an overall aim to foster positive, authentic connection. But when we stop and think about the ways that we maybe manage our direct reports or our team, or even interact with our own kids or others in our family, is this what you're doing? For many of us, not so much. So I wanted to just kind of pause there. That's kind of like what I wanted to kind of lay out for all of us. And then just to open it up a little bit more, but I wanted to see what's kind of piquing your interest, or maybe resonating with you the most in terms of what for you really stands out. And so I think Suzanne has a word cloud for us that she's going to go ahead and open up, just so we can kind of check in with all 100 or so of the folks on our call today, and then I'll open it up for some discussion.
So I put a link in the chat for everyone. So if you click the link in the chat, it should allow you to just type in which of the principles resonate with you the most. And we'll see kind of as the words grow, which ones are the ones that are the most voted for. And I'll throw that link in the chat one more time.
And there was a question on the first one. So the first, just to do a quick recap, the principles are, dose yourself and others with more positive emotion over negative. So it's that kind of notion of a ratio and needing more positive emotion over negative as a spark, and also to continue to nurture growth, learning, and change. The second was dreams more than goals. And the third was like focusing or emphasizing the relationship with others. And then there was a couple other components that were underneath each one.
We can see positive and positive emotions are growing large. Dreams.
Yeah, I definitely see there's a number that are kind of really characteristic of a number of your insights, the whole idea of dreams and dreams, not just goals. We see positive and positivity and positive emotion popping up a number of times. And those are the super dominant themes that I'm seeing. I do see a little bit around empathy, also listening is on the screen as well. And then of course, resonant relationships. So I see nurture who we wish to be. Excellent. Being versus doing also. Fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and thank you so much, Suzanne. That's really, really helpful. And I always like to kind of visually see where everyone is at, and that allows us to do it. So thanks for running the word cloud. So let me just kind of open it up for comment. I have no doubt there is a lot of experience among us. I know some of you are graduates of our programs, whether it's our certificate programs or our Masters of Positive Organization Development or our MBA programs, and many others. So maybe our EMBA program as well. Some of you are representing some of our client organizations that we do a lot of work with, which is fantastic. And others might be new to us and just kind of getting to know what we do. So wherever you're coming from and whatever your exposure to this material, just, no comment or question isn't important in my mind. And I'm sure somebody else, connect with them. So feel free to just let me know. I'm curious about, in particular, your own experiences and what really resonates for you around how to coach, how to mentor, how to manage others in a way that might embody these principles.
So we have Alexander that put his comment in the chat. Not sure what's going on with his mic, so we'll figure it out, Alexander. Yeah. But he had a question about the triggers that drove the opposing domains. He just finished reading Michael Pollan's How to Change Your Mind and was fascinated by how neural pathways are constructed and regulated in the brain.
So there's different experiences that might trigger the activation of different neural networks. Sometimes it's just the nature of the work that you're doing. For instance, if you're in the middle of preparing a report for that needs to go to your boss, or depending on the nature of your work, to others, often that you're needing to focus in cognitively, and you're in an analytical mode, meaning like you're really trying to make sure that the data is correct and make sure that that everything in that report is complete and accurate and then meets the deadline. So when we're in time sensitive or time bound activities, that adds a little bit of pressure. Anytime you're problem solving, anytime you're in a crisis mode, anytime you have an experience that causes or leads to worry or concern, any of those kind of would activate the analytic network. When you are in experiences, say you're celebrating a big birthday, like we did in our family this summer. So we had an 80th birthday and a 50th birthday, and everybody came together and we had just a lot of fun. So maybe you just took a trip, with good friends or family, or so in that mode, you're in the empathic network. And so you can experience this or reflect on your experiences if you've ever saw yourself, or people have given you feedback that you're in one zone and like you really literally are missing the other zone. So when was going through my PhD, I did that while I was working, and I had little kids. So I would work in the evenings on my dissertation and whatnot. And my husband jokes that I wasn't a very good roommate in that period of time, because I was just like this. And I think I forgot a lot of birthdays, and I didn't really connect with friends in the way that I normally would, because there wasn't a lot left of me, right, for the relationship building. A flip example might be if you go on vacation and you have a great experience and you come back to work and everyone's like cranked up the dial on work. There's all sorts of things going, and you kind of feel a little out of sorts, almost like you're kind of you're drumming to a different beat, right? And that's you coming back from the empathic network into the analytic. So there's many different triggers, I would say, Alexander, but those are just a couple of examples. And hopefully that helps a bit. Janet, I see your hand, and then Mary Beth. So Janet, why don't you go next?
Hey, hi, everyone. I'm an executive coach, and one of the trends that I've been picking up probably this summer is a lot of the C-suite is, for lack of a better word, complaining or distressed over a perceived lack of urgency. I'm hearing this kind of unilaterally, like why aren't people responding more quickly? And I think it's probably a combination of what you discussed at the front end: lack of engagement, people are exhausted, possibly personality. They're even to the point of, is there training? And I think people need to get trained on how to be more urgent. And I don't think that's the answer, but I'm curious what you think about this. Is this something that is trainable or changeable? Is it something that is more innate?
Sure. Let me ask you, since you've got some experience, what's your observation?
I do perceive that some of it is innate. I think a lot of maybe this is just I work predominantly in technology services firms, the C-suite. I'm noticing a trend of certain kinds of personality types that seem to ascend into those roles, not all the time, but there's a lot of independence and a lot of urgency. And maybe some of the more technical leaders are a little more thoughtful, a little more calculated. They're naturally going to move a little slower because being right is more important to them than maybe moving fast than some of at least at the C-suite level that I'm working at. But that's not a great answer to a CEO who's really wanting a lifeline here. How do I get these people? We got to move quick. There's a recession coming, or this customer complaint, or it's almost always about this like lack of a sense of urgency. And I don't know if that's trainable or not. I'd like to give them some hope, but maybe it's not accessible right now. I don't know.
Actually, I think it is. But when I work with the C-suite, I do a lot of executive coaching, and I just turn around and ask them, I'm like, tell me about the conversations you're having with your people. What is it that they want or need? Do you know? A lot of times, there is very little true conversation happening. And that's where that third principle I mentioned about resonant relationships, what's the state of real relationships? How in tune and in sync are managers at every level in the organization with those who report to them? And you could even start with just, have conversations and ask questions about, like, tell me what you really enjoy about your work here. Tell me what you'd really love to do. If you could do anything, what would you really love to do? So what happens is that there's too much of an over emphasis on the task and the problem and the results. And sometimes like zero conversation about the person.
Yeah. And
so, there is no, if there's a training program, I'd say put them through a training program on listening. Because we do that. We've got a day-long program on listening, because we are kidding ourselves. If we think that we're able to motivate somebody else, if we have really no idea, if we're only talking to them once or twice a year about their performance, and it's all about, here you go. And I come from a technology background, I have an engineering background. So I spend a lot of time in manufacturing and engineering and do a lot of coaching in those spaces. So I have a pretty good idea of kind of the culture And that's usually it. It's like there's so much of a predominant focus on only the results. And the people are like, well, we're not getting the results. Like, like what's the problem here? So it's if there's a quick fix, I'd say, walk around and have some conversations, just say, meet me for coffee and tell me about you and tell me like the high point. What do you really love about what you're doing here? It's not all like, tell me all the problems, but you've got to start there.
Okay.
Mary Beth, good to see you.
Hi, Ellen.
Thank you.
Yeah, so an example, because every time I reread your book and kind of take my notes out, I have to keep reminding myself. But I was coaching an executive and he was complaining about this peer that he needed to influence, not uncommon. And he would kind of say all these negative things. And then he kept coming back to, but this guy gives so much to the company. He cares so much about the team. He cares about where we go. And so I just kind of played that back to him and I said, hey, what if you went into your next conversation with reminding yourself that aspect? Because do you really believe that? Absolutely. He cares so much. He's given so much. If you went into your next conversation with him, let me know how that conversation goes. So he said, okay, I'll try that. So he went in, before he went into the room, told himself, this guy is great. He's contributed a lot. He really cares deep down. He came back and he said, oh my gosh, we had a way different conversation. So, and they came up with something together. And it was kind of that he went in with that analytical brain and some negative, energy going in. And when he switched to that other side of his brain, he understood what he was doing because he was a pretty smart guy. So he understood the brain thing and how he could do that. And then when he saw the result, he got it. And saw that was really easy. It really didn't take much energy for him to do that. And then the rest happened. So it works, and it is simple. It's practice and it's a reminder. So I just wanted to share that back.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. And so that comment and story reminds me, and also then Janet's ahead of it, of like what assumptions is an individual, like in that like mini case study, Mary Beth, like that case, say that what assumptions does an individual, or by extension the C-suite, of an organization, have around how people really develop? So a lot of times, especially in technical organizations, there's this predominant assumption that we have to analyze everything that's going wrong and then give feedback to people about what's going wrong, because that then will motivate them to want to fix what's going wrong. Well, that's one part of the story. There's a whole nother part of like what's going well. And so any of you who are familiar with, positive psychology, of course, and even appreciative inquiry as a methodology and philosophy, turns that on its head. And the reason those are important, levers, and why they work, like appreciative inquiry as a methodology and philosophy in particular, and other approaches like that, is because you recognize that you start with the strengths, you start with what's working well, and you garner more energy. It's like the equivalent of like putting people in the PEA. When you ask them about, like what's really going well, and you anchor them in that first before you say, okay, like let's look at some other areas that need to be addressed. Now they've got a lot more cognitive and emotional and physiological fuel to go tackle whatever that is. I'm not talking about, though, if there's like a real crisis in that moment, you need your best minds fixing the crisis. I'm not talking about that. The problem is people, often default into that crisis mode approach or problem solving approach and carry it over to organization and talent development. It doesn't work. You don't develop people in that way. And so instead, you've got to go in assuming positive intention and that there's gold in that person. There's a treasure, like what is it? Their talents, their capabilities. And so that's where you have to focus if you want to change behavior or kind of inspire and motivate. So yeah, great. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so we've got a bunch of things coming in through the chat. And so Alex, before I sort of pass your question on to Dr. Van Osten, I want to say we have a really great master's degree program called the MPOD for short, which will really allow you to dig into your question here in depth. And Alex's question is, these principles make sense and it's easy to remain mindful, positive, and dream focused internally, but how can we influence others, peers, direct reports, mentees, etc.? And how can we apply the principles and motivate our team? So again, MPOD, for, but as a, ballparking it, Ellen.
Well, hopefully the principles I shared kind of give you a good, starting point. But when I step back from all of this and I think about it, I'd say lean into your humanity and approach others with compassion. So what does that mean? It's really about being focused on the other person and what they really want and need, meeting them where they are, and connecting with them. So you can't connect with somebody if you're not talking to them, and you're not talking at them, you're talking with them. And so the nature of the conversations, are you even taking time, is what was coming out of some of the other comments, right? First of all, like, what time are you taking? And then what's your approach? And a lot of times we think we have to go in and we help by telling people what to do, giving advice or whatever. And that rarely is what's most helpful. It can be helpful, but what's most helpful is when we just start with just being interested in others, to know what they think, to know how they feel, to know, what's important to them. And so if you don't know that about other people that you work with, or if you're coaching them, then you've got work to do, because you're obviously spending time in some other way, and that may be needed based on the scope of, your engagement. If you're an external consultant or coach, or, there's a reason for it. Maybe somebody's brand new and they have no idea what to do. So you're mapping it out for them. But even that, when you're brand new in an organization, you're so excited to be there, right? And a lot of times I just watch the organization just totally miss that opportunity, because that person is so pumped up and nobody asks them, like about their ideas a lot of times, or what they see, or what drew them to the organization in the first place, and what they're most excited about. So, paying attention to the questions that you're asking, and if you're asking any at all, is where I would start.
So Lynn Schroeder has a question about advice you might have for when you're trying to ignite that inner flame in an employee, but they aren't really good at articulating their goals and their passions to you.
So it can be tricky, right? And so I'd say, first of all, it's a process. So I'll offer a couple of things for your own mindset. So start with your own mindset. Again, what assumptions are you carrying into that? One assumption is that this is a process of discovery. It's not like there's one right answer. And so if you're interacting with somebody, say you're working with them to understand their strengths more, and they're like, I don't know, I'm not really sure. I'm not good at this. You tell me what my strengths are. You see them, that kind of thing. That a lot of times it's because somebody isn't in the empathic network. They're in the analytic network. They have to get to a place where they can reflect. Another dimension might be they don't feel psychologically safe to do that. They're not really feeling like they can trust you or the situation. So you have to work to build the trust. And that takes time, right? That takes some conversation. That takes you explaining your intention, that you really want to be helpful and supportive, right? And you want to get to know them, things like that. You've got to be really explicit in that way, but in an authentic way that's true to who you are and your strengths. You've got to convey to the other person that you care about them, and you want to support them in their intentional development or change. So it really starts there. And a lot of times that will focusing on understanding it's a process, and then building trust will carry you really, really far. And go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
I was just going to say, and listening is one really straightforward way to do that. So when we teach our introductory coach class, which many of you in this call I know have been in with me before, Coach Approach, and Meg Selbach teaches that with me as well. We, over the years, have tweaked that program based on participant feedback where they wanted more and more around listening, helping them to be better listeners, because of the fact that it resonates with all of us. Like when someone listens to us, we feel cared for, that they've taken the time to really stop and listen, right? And so it's something that doesn't take a whole lot of time, but has a huge impact. But we're human, and sometimes we've got like not so helpful communication habits. And so paying attention, to that is an important place to start. Suzanne, I know we're getting close. To wrapping up. Did you have another comment, or was there one that you wanted?
I was going to say there was one that was right after that, and I think a lot of what you just said, Ellen, speaks to it. But the timing of this session is great because it's year end, and for a lot of folks, they're getting ready for performance review season, right? And performance reviews are often coaching for compliance. And so the question really relates to, how do you take those performance reviews, which are geared more towards coaching for compliance, and shift that conversation more into the PEA, really while still getting in that other piece that needs to be done.
Thank you for catching that, Suzanne. I love it. Yeah. Hi, Kurt. Good to see you. I know this is from Kurt Sardiga, one of my former students. So performance reviews shouldn't be a surprise. They should be an ongoing conversation. So part of it is it once a year, or are you having multiple conversations or continuous ones over the course of the year? So I'd start there. If it's like few and far between, or very infrequent, or even once a year, then that's not enough. It should be an ongoing conversation around what's working well against your goals. How are you doing towards achieving? That's the performance metric, right? And where is it that you need to make some tweaks? And then the third would be, how can I support you in that if you're the manager? So that's kind of one piece. But I would even start before you ever go into the performance review, asking the other person in advance, what is it that they would like to focus on in their meeting, and to have them do like their own self-assessment first. So you start with them, and you start with how they thought their year went. So switch it so that they're the one, again, doing most of the sharing and the reflecting. And then it sets you up to also then come in and comment on that and support them. And then also, if they haven't given themselves enough credit, you've got an opportunity to point out what's gone well. And if they need some additional perspective or need some additional work, you can say, hey, I need you to really focus here. So it's not that we don't have the performance conversation, but it's in the context of them and what it is that they see first. And then you become much more of a trusting support in their own development. So that's, I guess, some of my initial thoughts on that. But I know that we are at the hour. Suzanne, did you have any other final comments before we have to wrap up here?
No, I was going to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Ellen, for your time. And as always, a really inspiring presentation. For those of you that need to drop off, have a wonderful afternoon. But Ellen, there was a question that came in the chat about, could you share a little bit about the coaching research lab and the coaching of services and certifications available? So for those that have to drop off, great. Have a wonderful day. But for those that are interested in learning more about that, Ellen, if you could just take a minute, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, happy to do that. Yes, there's actually a coaching research lab that some of the organizations here are a part of, which we're very proud to say. So Smucker and Ford and Crown Equipment and Fifth Third Bank and Erie Insurance and Dealer Tire are all members of the lab. The lab is where we as academics and organizations come together to advance coaching research. We collaborate around it. So these organizations get to participate in research. And we come together a couple times a year to have discussions that elevate all of our learning. So we bring in scholars from around the world who are doing work in coaching or related topics like listening. So if you are in an organization, or if you are working with an organization that you think would be interested to become a member, you can find more information at this website or just email me. What unites all these organizations are that they want to build a culture of coaching and development. So it's a culture of coaching and leadership development that these organizations are trying to establish. And so that's an area we have a lot of experience in. You can find out a whole lot more in this book. We curated a lot of research over a lot of years, but there's also a lot of exercises and practical tips. So check that out. And then also there's resources here at Weatherhead, executive programs. We've got all sorts of certificate programs in emotional intelligence coaching and many others. And then we also have a massive open online course that's offered through Coursera. It's not technically free, only I think it's a nominal amount now that Coursera charges. We don't get anything from it. So it's whatever they're charging. It might be $49, but that's Richard Boyatzis, Melvin Smith, and I in that as well. So I think that's pretty much the resources that I could share. So thank you again to everybody who was a part of this. And I hope that we'll see you soon and often at the Weatherhead School of Management. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.